Hello, this is Angelo Stralopa, CEO of Positivity Coaching, and you're listening to my podcast.
So here I am with Melissa Kelly-McCabe, who is an ICF MCC coach, and she is board certified and a Gestalt Professional Coach. Melissa coaches women CEOs and executives as they accelerate attaining their business goals, imprint their own style on their company, and bring fun and purpose into their lives. With a particular focus using nature and creativity as her coaching partners, Melissa helps clients deepen their self-understanding and create action forward through a Gestalt lens. She is currently on faculty and director of training for the coaching certification program at Gestalt Institute of Cleveland. Hello and welcome, Melissa.
Thank you, Angela. It's nice to spend some time with you this morning.
It's really great that we are finally having this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And we have been longtime friends, full disclosure. And I have been admiring how passionate you are about things and how creative and innovative. And this whole theme about nature and coaching, I find this is very, very intriguing. So I would like you to speak a little bit, or as long as you like, about that. What is it? What is that about?
Yeah, well, thank you. And this is a perfect time of year. It's autumn now, and this is a perfect time of year to even be talking about this because it's the change of seasons, at least here in the U.S. And the smells are very different. What we see is very different. The air has a different quality to it, and it's getting cooler. So this is a perfect time to really talk about how nature can be inspiring and also really be a partner for us, whether one is a coach or is a person who's not a coach, but really wants to engage in some of their own self-discovery about who they are and how they walk in the world and what choices and options they have. So nature is a profound partner. When we look even just out the window, whether somebody's in a city, whether you're in the country, looking out the window is almost a first step to going from what's going on inside of us to being able to see a little bit more about what's outside of us, let alone when we're actually walking out in nature. And when I say nature, some people think that I'm thinking, oh, the wild, you have to fly someplace or you have to drive a long distance to be in the mountains or on the water or in the woods or in a field. And every time we walk outside and breathe air that's not inside, we are in nature. So it's also a little city park, or maybe it's a little garden or a garden patch that's outside your front door. Sometimes it's even a potted plant that's inside or outside our home. All of that is nature. And we're actually nature too. So we're connected in on a visceral way with nature just because we are animals and nature too. So as I navigate in my own coaching practice and also in my own life, I recognize the impact that being in and with nature has on me. And so this idea of being in nature is that maybe I'm a foreign person coming into a surrounding area that I'm separate from. But all of a sudden, when I change my language and change my thought process to be with nature, so I am in withness with nature, all of a sudden we're friends, we're partners, we have something to teach and to learn each other. So as I think about the place of nature, both in my coaching and in my own personal life and personal growth, I move into a place of witness and a place of wonder to to get curious about what is it that I can learn? What is it that I can share? What metaphors are there for me in terms of how nature solves its own problems? And in many ways, just allowing that visceralness of being in nature, being in daylight, breathing outdoor air, standing among trees and flowers and grasses and rocks, how all of that can impact both my emotional well-being and also my physical well-being.
Wonderful. So I remember when I am in nature and I'm consciously in nature, so I understand that I started having these connections. It felt like, as you were talking, it felt like this is a kind of awareness.
Yeah.
And I think for me, from my observations, is that for me, it felt like I was being offered the possibility of broadening my awareness.
Mm-hmm. So how did you do that for yourself? As you think back, how did you do that?
It gives me a lot of reflection time. So broadening my awareness, I'll take a cliche from what we say about innovation. I am witnessing, I am observing more things, or I am observing things differently.
Yeah. It's in some cases it's the little things that are really big. Like pick up a leaf from maybe don't pick it from a tree, but look at it while it's on a tree or when it's on the ground and actually really look at it. You know, what colors are there? What textures are there? What does it smell like? You know, what does it feel like in your hands? Just sort of zeroing in on even the little things, picking up a rock, doing the same thing, or a shell, or taking off your shoes and while walking in the water or having your feet on ground, actually draw your attention to your feet and what they're experiencing as your attention is in your feet. So yeah, this idea of shifting our attention to something else other than the running to-do list in our brains, the what's next, what just happened, and really turning our attention both outward and looking around and seeing what there really is to see, and attending to the sensations in our body as we're feeling the wind on the hairs on our arm, as we're walking and our feet are on the sand or on moss or on bare dirt. Really focusing our attention just creates a different, like you're saying, a different kind of feeling.
And maybe with hearing sounds and sounds and noises, and that's very different for us. For those of us like me, that I'm living in the city. So the sounds that you hear usually in the city are noises. Mm-hmm. So you tend to mechanically trying to cut down all the noises.
Yes.
And then when you find yourself in nature,
then what happens?
Well, I guess if you're on the automatic pilot, then you keep doing the same things. But if this unveils in front of you, then if you realize that there's something here that can be done very differently, there's connection, there are sounds, different sounds, which might be, annoying because you're not used to those sounds at the beginning, or there are sounds that might be very soothing, very relaxing, for example, like listening to the small waves of the sea on the shore, and which is one of my favorites. And then, I don't know, hearing distant sounds, hearing sounds that are close, and hearing sounds that are between is like having spatial awareness. Right. So where is that sound coming from? Which bird is that? Something like that.
Yes. And I think that something you said just a moment ago is really important to underscore here. It's sort of that you got to make that shift. It's almost like you got to click into that, because when my brain is going and I've got all these things that I'm working on and then things that I need to think about, I can just be marching through a beautiful park or marching through the woods or sitting on the side of an ocean or a pond and not hear anything except the list that is running through my head. And so it does take a conscious flip or switch or acknowledgement that, wait a minute, here I am in nature. Let me just tune out a little bit of what I'm listening to in my head and tune into my surroundings. And those pieces, it might just be you hear a bird, and then being still and hearing the next, there's another bird. And just like you say, listen to that, the wind in those trees over there. And there's crickets. And so the picture starts to really fill in when we allow our ears to tune into what's going on around us. And the more we tune in, the more we can hear in the silence of nature.
Interesting. Maybe you can find there are new normalities, like if it's summer and if it's hot, then I guess during the day you will hear the cicadas, but you will not hear them during the night.
Yeah.
You'll hear different sounds.
Right. Different seasons, different times of day, different weather patterns when it's just after a storm or just before a storm, and in the calm of the day. Yeah. Before electronics and all of the things that have kept us so occupied these last decades, I often wonder how the day would look if we were completely attuned, if I were completely attuned to nature and sunrise, sunset, weather patterns, and so on. If I tuned into those more than just knowing whether I should be wearing galoshes or a hat, but tuned into what happens in me with the passage of time, the passage of seasons. I often have wondered, what would I know then? And it's hard to do that in this day and age. And we can still sit and wonder about that.
So as I was listening to you mentioning about taking a leaf and start to observe that, and taking a stone and things like that, I guess these things, all these, let's say, practices open up gradually, probably, your awareness. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if you have thought about that, or what's your opinion? I'm sure you have thought about that, but what's the intention about, after a while, about noticing things? Like, in the city, you are intentionally waiting to hear when the train will come when you're in the train station, because that's what you're there for.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that there are multiple answers to that question. And on the one hand, it can be just almost for meditation, or for getting out of my day-to-day so that I can do a reset, so that I can gain some resiliency. So almost as a timeout of the craziness of life, to just be in nature for 5 or 10 minutes or be with nature, even if it's in my home, to reset myself. And there are a whole variety of recreational reasons why one might want to be in nature. I think professionally is where I'd like to answer that question a little bit. In nature, nature has figured out ways to solve really difficult problems. How to move, how water moves in order to create canyons, how wind shifts and moves to carve stone, how trees can grow in the most unusual places, how they've figured out how to access water and nutrients. And so as a person in myself who is often in a place of solving problems, whether it's solving my own problems or being engaged as a consultant or a coach to partner with somebody else to help them solve their problems, I recognize that the vastness of nature allows almost a new set of ideas, a new set of stimulus about how to recognize obstacles and barriers and how to work around them. So often when I'm working with clients, for example, in nature, one way that we interact with nature is to get really clear on what's the question or what's the dilemma that somebody is wrestling with, and intentionally go out into a natural place and see how nature has solved some of those dilemmas. If it's a dilemma around, gosh, I'm seeing a real barrier in my career, I want to move in this direction and I can't figure out how to get through that barrier, we'll go and we'll look in nature about how trees move around barriers, how moss moves around barriers, how water reshapes itself in order to get around barriers, and see what there is to learn from that. So nature can help us by demonstrating how it solves its difficult problems. And we can use some of that in terms of looking at how we can solve some of our own problems. I also think that nature is a really powerful metaphor. If a picture paints 1,000 words, as they say, then a metaphor paints 1,000,000. And so one way that we can bring nature into our lives is, in terms of our work, is to see what in nature is similar to something that we're working on. So if we're, say, a team that's trying to work together towards some common aim, something that needs to be done in a corporation, we can think about a metaphor that's like. So, for example, just sort of thinking here now, that metaphor might be in the United States and Canada, we have geese that fly from the north to the south every year. And there's a whole cooperation that these geese know how to fly in formation for long periods of time, and they shift leaders, and they create a pattern that creates it easier for some birds to fly, and so on. So we may say that we would like our team to really be like the Canadian geese as they're moving south. And that metaphor is something that everyone can understand, and we can sort of work toward flying in formation like those geese. So also using nature as a metaphor for the work that we do brings so many different people together around a common vision of what it is that we're trying to do. So I realize I'm talking and talking and talking. So let me just stop there and get curious about what's going on for you as you're listening.
I'm speechless because this is all great, fantastic. But there's a question here for me. But first of all, I like that you mentioned the things that you mentioned, because I was thinking that I had to make sure that our listeners will know that this is a very authentic and unique work that you're doing, and to the extent of my understanding, my knowledge is that you are offering that for some coaching clients, some trainees perhaps, and in your beautiful retreats that you organize, which are very unique thematically, and you are organizing all these elements, and you pick up a location, but someone would say everybody picks up a location. Knowing you for all these years, I know how much attention, detail, and love you're putting into this, so that makes it very, very unique. I mean, you have to work with Melissa to understand the importance of her work. You cannot find it anywhere, and that makes it a treasure. And you're welcome. So I was thinking that I think I understand to some extent what you said about how you're working with clients when you're in nature and trying to find out how to solve problems. When they have some kind of problems, try to find out the right metaphor and try to see, observe, and understand what nature is doing in similar situations. So one different question that I had is based again on my experience. Like, I remember myself 2 years ago when I was coming back from vacations, I had been noticing myself for a number of years that in the beginning, in the first days while I was back in the city, commuting to work back and forth, I accidentally and intentionally starting to gaze things that I was observing or cherishing in nature when I was on my vacations, like the tips of the mountains, the color of the sky, the formation of the clouds, things that you can look at when you're in a traffic jam.
Yes. They
had a newfound importance for me, and I said so. Sometimes I was saying to myself, so I need to keep that. I need to preserve that. And, after a while, I fell into routine, rolled back into routine, and that was forgotten. I'm wondering, what can we do to preserve that?
Yeah, that's such a great observation that you can sort of bring it back, because it's just so easy to bring work thoughts into vacation. I want it to be just as easy to bring vacation thoughts into work. And so I'm just so aligned with what you're saying. What's interesting about the human brain is that our brains don't know the difference between what's real and what's imagined. And so as we are in nature, something transformative happens. And also when we imagine being in nature, that same transformation can happen, because we can train our brains to feel that way as we think about nature and remember our experience. So a couple of things stand out to me as easy possibilities, Angelos. I mean, there's a lot of virtual reality now. So you could slap on virtual reality glasses or goggles and be back in nature. Apparently, they're doing a lot of studies to see what's the difference between really being there and virtual reality being there. At the same time, being able to completely immerse yourself in a picture, a photo of nature, and almost not see the frame around it, but really be in that place and imagine being in that place. I think that it's more evocative if it's a place that you have been, so that you can remember the feelings of being there and the food you ate and the smell that was there. There are also many recordings that are easily downloadable and that probably a lot of us have in our playlists that we don't play as often, around the ocean surf, or a babbling brook, or a tropical rainforest, or a thunderstorm, that we can plug into our ears or on a recording device or something, and fall asleep to remind our bodies what it was like to be in that place, or to take a walk, hearing those sounds, especially if they're reminiscent of a trip that you've been on, or a nature walk that you've experienced, so that it's almost telling our brains to go back to that place and feel what it feels like. So I also think that even if it's 1 or 2 or 3 minutes, a really short period of time, to listen and to just go within and be in that place, even if it is viscerally only being in that place for 2 or 3 minutes, that can be very restorative for our bodies. To just take a break for 3 minutes, plug that sound in, and be there. And then the last thing I'd offer is to take your shoes off and go outside with bare feet, or go out and take your shoes off and stand in the grass or stand on moss, refraining from standing on concrete. What happens is something called earthing. That's a whole nother podcast. But with earthing, what's happening is our bare skin is touching bare earth, and the electromagnetic charge in our bodies aligns with the electromagnetic charge of the earth. And as part of nature, that's how it's supposed to be. Remember what it feels like when you're in bare feet walking on the beach, or when you're in bare feet walking on fresh grass. What's happening there is that we're discharging the electromagnetic energy that's in our bodies. I mean, animals are born with no shoes on. And so we are, as we keep putting shoes on our feet, we're insulating ourselves from the electromagnetic forces of the earth. And so another very easy way to get grounded really quickly or to become centered really quickly is to step outside, take your shoes off, and stand on the earth for just a few minutes. I think that was a lot. I think maybe you were asking for a shorter answer.
No. Just made the pause because I think it's so important, and I know that it's so important, but I think it's so important if we can start making changes and start walking barefoot in the park. Isn't that I think a film back?
I think so. I'm sure there's songs about all of this too.
Yeah, right. There's a song or something, but barefoot something. Yeah. So, and I know that we have been talking for a while, and we're approaching the end of our podcast. So it was great. It was actually great pleasure and honor that you allowed us to experience your presence in our podcast and talking about nature and all these things that are so important. What else would you like to say or to include to close this podcast, Melissa?
I think the only thing I'd like to say is an invitation. This doesn't have to be huge. This can be really small. So the invitation is, if you listen, when you finish this podcast, to not finish it until about 3 minutes after the podcast ends, and just walk outside and notice what's out there, and maybe take your shoes off.
I think that's wonderful and a great invitation for everybody that can hold themselves accountable for that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this. These are the things that we need to remind ourselves that I think that are helping us drive into a higher level of consciousness that can change the way we're thinking and change our lives. Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
This is Angelos Trolopas, and you can listen to my podcast on Spotify, Apple, and Google.